Do we have a quorum? To ask, since it is Veterans Day, first happy Veterans Day. Thank you to all who have served and are serving. And I'm going to ask Mr. Edgens to come up, our veteran for the day, and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Burst into song. After that, announcements. We're going to start with Ms. Frobe.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank Howard Congregational Church in North Nashville for inviting me to speak last Sunday. This was a very welcoming congregation that's doing great work in the community, and I was really honored to receive the invitation. I would also like to announce that Diane Ravitch will be here in Nashville to speak next week. Dr. Ravitch served as Assistant Secretary of Education for the United States under Presidents Bush and Clinton. She's an education historian and best-selling national author. The event will be hosted by the Tennesseans Reclaiming Educational Excellence, also known as TREE, the Mama Bears, and the Tennessee Bats, and it'll be on Wednesday, November 19th at 6:30 p.m., free and open to the public. And for more details and location, you can visit the TREE website or Facebook page.
On Monday, November 17th, we'll have the first community meeting on the Hillsborough High School capital improvements. It'll be at Hillsborough High School at 6 p.m. and we hope everybody, all the neighbors and stakeholders and parents and friends will come out and join us for that conversation.
You got anything?
It's a shocker, I do. I know. I just want to give a quick shout out to the staff and faculty and students at MLK, since they were just recognized as a 2014 National Blue Ribbon School of Excellence. And on top of that, they also were finalists for the Tennessee Score Prize. So it's just accolade after accolade, and they're doing particularly well, and not surprisingly, the STEM fields. They've had a couple high school seniors recognized for their research through the Vanderbilt School for Science and Mathematics, and in fact one of their students was selected as one of only 6 from across the country to present at the National Bioinformatics Conference in Washington, D.C. in November. So I think it's just a good testament to a lot of good work being done throughout the school. So just a shout out to MLK.
Thank you. Ms. Shepherd?
Thank you. Recently, we've had several leadership and learning staff members and from the National Area Chamber of Commerce representing MNPS and attending the National Career Academy Coalition, and we wrapped up the honors. NCAC named Nashville as the first model city in the entire United States for the outstanding work in transforming our high schools, transforming teaching and learning, and transforming business engagement. We have 305 businesses and post-secondary partners working alongside our teachers, students, and administrators, transforming our schools from within. MNPS has over 17,000 students in the Academy model. Our own Dr. Jay Steele was selected as the NCAC president for the next 2 years. Mark Hill for the National Area Chamber of Commerce won the National Exemplar Business Partner of the Year. He was presented this due to his incredible partnership with the Chamber that they have demonstrated in support of the high school reform with the academies of Nashville. The 4 academies at Antioch High School were recognized as model academies. Antioch High School joins McGavock and Hillwood High Schools with wall-to-wall national model academies. One of Whites Creek High School's academies were also recognized as national model. So this brings to the total 14 national model academies in Nashville as the most of any community in the United States. Kudos. Congratulations. No.
Okay, I'm sorry.
On October 22nd, I had the honor and pleasure to represent my colleague, Dr. Brannon, on the VIP tour at Overton High School. Overton had a big crowd to visit this great school. Dr. Pelham gave a brief history of the school, and one fact that he noted was that he had just learned that Overton has been named as the most diverse high school in the in the entire state of Tennessee. And also, highlights of this tour was noted in Frank Daniels' article in the Tennessean on Sunday, October the 26th. So if you haven't read it, it's a really good piece featuring Overton High School. On Friday, October 24th, I attended the 23rd annual Eagle Run celebration at Andrew Jackson Elementary School. It's a day of fitness, fun, and family, and the staff sponsors at Andrew Jackson. A special thanks to my friend Susan Floyd, who's a PE teacher at Andrew Jackson, and without her hard work, Eagle Run would never happen. And on Friday, October 31st, I was honored to participate in a panel discussion with the L organization and the Chinese delegation right here in this very boardroom. It was great to see some familiar faces that I've met on my trip last March to China. And after the panel discussion, the Bureau of Education from Guangzhou province presented a plaque to the Board of Education here, which I presented on behalf of my colleagues. And last but certainly not least, the McGavick Raiders football team made it into the finals this year with a record of 8-2. They played Overton in a rematch last Friday, and they won in the bottom half of the second overtime by 1 point. And so this Friday they will play Ravenwood at 7 o'clock. I just want to say congratulations to McGavick High School football team and all the parents, faculty, and students at McGavick. Now I'm done.
All right. Ms. Spearing.
Yes, thank you. During my announcements in October, I discussed my participation at the various community meetings Dr. Register hosted with the priority schools and the East Nashville Plan. I feel passionate about the need for wraparound services for our impoverished students. During that segment, I mentioned that I had visited Stratford High School. While talking with the principal, Mike Steele, he shared with me that at the beginning of the school year, he had to call an ambulance an average of 3 times a week for the medical necessities of his student population. I neglected to put this in full context. I want to be clear that no ambulance has been needed at Stratford High School due to any violence or student behavior, only medical necessities. I hope this clears up any confusion that may have resulted from my comments. I have good news for our teachers and spouses. Beginning in January of 2015, our insurance company will begin a new service which will be providing hearing aids for our teachers and their dependents, up to $700 per year. So this is almost unheard of. Very rarely do you have an insurance company that will provide hearing aids. So I think it's really exciting that we are able to do that. I appreciate David Hines and the trustees for offering this service. Maplewood High School opened their Entrepreneur Center with their Academy business on last Wednesday morning. Celebrating with the students was a member of the ABC show, The Shark Tank. On December the 3rd, Tennessee Recreation and Parks Association will offer workshops to individuals, schools, and associations who are interested in learning more about community gardens and outdoor classrooms. This workshop will be held at East Community Center on Woodland from 10 to 3, and lunch will be provided. 50 grants will be awarded to help fund the startup of these community gardens across the state of Tennessee. To learn more about community gardens and grants, please contact Chelsea Smith at 790-0041. And I want to also extend my congratulations to Dr. Steele and the staff. Thank you.
I have none. Surprised as this may seem, Ms. Shepherd.
I forgot one. I'm sorry. On this coming Wednesday, we will have a capital needs budget committee meeting here in the boardroom at 3:30, and I encourage everyone to attend this very important meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Awards and recognitions. Jeannie Pupo-Walker.
It is my pleasure to recognize tonight our parent ambassadors. I don't know how much you're aware of their work, so you have a handout on your at your spot about the Parent Ambassadors Program. So this was an initiative that grew out of the Mayor's New American Advisory Council in Metro Schools. So in the summer, we put our heads together and developed a process for having a way for parents who are immigrant parents in the United States but who are active leaders in their community and Metro Schools parents to give back to their communities and actually in some cases, almost case manage new arrival families to metro schools. So we had an application process. We had over 60 folks apply, and we chose 20, and we've ended up with 18. And they're here tonight, and I just want to speak briefly about them. So they are from 13 different countries, represent 9 different languages, an extremely talented group. So we have people who were United Nations field workers in Africa, engineers, accountants, business owners, very talented, already giving back in their communities. So they got a 2-day training in September. So we've had many departments at MNPS already step in and train them. Customer service talked about the kind of work questions that they get. We had long, extensive training from EL on the EL process. We had, today they met with Debbie McAdams and learned about the IEP process. What does it mean to have a disability and an English language learner student in your home? They learned about what social workers do. They learned about expulsion and discipline processes. So they have incredible questions. They're an incredible group. So what I want to do is call them up one by one, and they're just going to line up here, and we're going to recognize them. I do want to say also that part of the plan, and I want us to give a shout out to Fred Carr, who helped me co-fund cell phones for each of them so families can call them. And so we assign families, as families enter MNPS and go through the EL office, they're asked if they would like to be connected with a parent ambassador. And then we, one by one, connect that family to a parent ambassador. So we've had ambassadors here who have been to IEP meetings. We've had ambassadors here who have set up community meetings and parent meetings in their schools that are answering questions for parents. And so some of that is in that formal case management mode, and some of it's really just in their mosques, churches, communities, wherever they live. So they are a super impressive bunch, so I'm excited to recognize them. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to call them up one by one, and they're going to come up. So I'm going to start with Intisar Al-Kafaji. Come on up. So these folks have kids across almost every cluster. So I'm going to have you go stand right over there. Thank you. This is Sabir Abdel Halim. Thank you. Lajan Ahmed. I do want to say that we have folks here, thank you, who have kids in traditional metro schools. We also have several charter parents here tonight as well. Irini Bakum is not here. I forgot. Irini's not here. Marta Cedillo. There you go. Okay, we have a couple that couldn't make it tonight. Nauzad Haurami. Thank you. Kam Kap. Thank you. Bayan Kokoye. And Bayan's daughter graduated from Metro Schools, now in law school, so she's an alumni parent. Started law school this fall. Mina Luban. I'm sorry, Muna Liban. So sorry. There we go. Jamilet Montesinos. Ali Nuradin. Thank you. Boshra Salib. Raul Serna. Leilan Shabdin. Thank you. Jose Sauceda, who's on crutches, bless his heart, is going to struggle on up here. And finally, Gangu Zola. Thank you. So I want to give them a round of applause and thank them. Thank you.
Okay, now we will move on to our And the Good News Is segment. Nola Jones?
I'm not Nola
That's not
Jones, but
Nola.
I'll start. Dr. Jones will speak in just a second. I wanted to introduce this piece to you tonight, but as a former music teacher and all the work that we've been doing in Nashville with our business partners, we wanted to share with you an exciting private-public partnership with a company here in town and Hunters Lane High School. And this is a product of Nola's work, so I'm going to let her talk about it, and then I'll come back at the end.
Well, it actually wouldn't have happened if Jay hadn't encouraged me to do it because it sounded too good to be true. Recently, I received a phone call from R&D Events from California, and they asked us to identify 6 of our students from Metro Nashville, from a particular Metro Nashville public school who love making music but cannot afford to purchase their own instruments. The event was described as being community outreach, a piece of a larger team-building conference for the Siemens Company, which you may be familiar with. Like I said, it sounded too good to be true, so I asked Jay if he thought I ought to pursue it, and he said to me, well, there's a lot more to be won than lost in checking it out and seeing if you don't think this is a good idea. So with his encouragement, I went to Hunters Lane High School because of their young, energetic music teacher, Will Brooks. Will came into my office a little over a year ago and looked me straight in the face, and he said I would not be alive if it were not for my music teacher in inner city Detroit. Put me wherever you need the most work. I'll shoulder the heavy lifting. And I looked him straight in the face and said, son, I don't know where you're going, but we've got a job for you in Metro schools. And true to his word, he's honored that in everything that he's done, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a minute. But he identifies with our economically disadvantaged children, and he's keenly aware of the differences that music can make in their lives, and he's lived that every day. He and Dr. Kessler, Susan Kessler, their principal, identified the students who possess strong music talent, they're academically proficient, and they've emerged as student leaders in the school as well. So our MNPS music department also worked with KHS America, whose world headquarters are based here in Davidson County, to leverage the money that they had allocated for this event. So we were able to do more than we originally thought possible. And that's a partnership through Music Makes Us that's been really, really beneficial. The 6 students were told they were competing for one instrument, and they were asked to write essays about their love of music and why they really wanted to own their very own instrument. Their essays, interviews, and performance during the event that day would be judged, and then one student would ultimately win an instrument. On the day of the event, R&D Events sent a huge limousine to Hunters Lane High School, picked them all up in front of the big circle, took Dr. Kessler, Mr. Brooks, and the students to the Sheridan City Center, and there they joined teams of Siemens corporate executives from all across the country and led those teams in pairs to write a songwriting competition. At the end of the event, they pulled all the students out on the stage and announced the one student that had won, and then they said, oh, you know what, we have instruments for everybody, and chaos ensued. And then they proceeded to give another instrument to the school itself for being part of this program. Well, the student stories were pretty compelling, and I won't share all of them with you, but I will share this. 2 of the 6 students had deceased mothers. One student had written about her depression depression that she was battling because her clarinet had been repossessed. And another one said that she was going to sleep with her new trombone because she'd never owned anything of significant value, and how important this was to them to own their very own musical instrument that they can have for the rest of their lives. So the story gets better. Corporate executives from Siemens were so impressed with our students and so touched by their willingness to be vulnerable in songwriting and being creative and their leadership in these teams that they started writing checks to Dr. Kessler and handing her cash money. And there's really no process for taking up those kind of donations. So she was thrilled, and she got lots of witnesses and made everybody write everything down, and certainly didn't turn away the donations. But in addition to the 6 instruments for the individual children, the 1 instrument for the school, and the $2,500 that the individual participants donated to the school, everybody left with a great feeling of we are indeed, if you wonder if what we're doing makes a difference in the individual lives of our children, these kind of days remind us. In his thank you letter, I hope I can read this, Mr. Brooks stated, "I feel all this was meant to be because it is amazing to see the transformation in the culture here at Hunters Lane. There are kids begging to join band. Instead of hearing arguments over who has the best shoes, my kids argue over who can play the most scales." In her description of the day, Principal Kessler wrote, "I ended up getting to be the privileged witness of the life-changing day for our students. I wish you all could have been there because it was one of those moments that makes this job truly worthwhile." And in closing, when I asked Jeff Rhodes of R&D Events, when I was in my suspicious stage at the very beginning, I said, "Why Nashville?" And he said, "The support for music education in Nashville is common knowledge, and we want to give back in a community where music is valued in the school system." So on behalf of Music Makes Us, the 6 Hunters Lane students who now own their very own shiny new instruments that they'll get to play for the rest of their lives, their principal, Dr. Kessler, who has a renewed interest in music as a transformation tool at Hunters Lane. We want to thank our school board, we want to thank Dr. Register, and we want to thank Dr. Steele for your continuing support of this important work that we do in Metro schools.
Righty.
So, I think you all know how I feel about music. But the really good news is this company is going to do this again. So they're choosing another school, and they're working with Dr. Jones. They were so impressed with everything. They want to, what's the word, move it forward or spend it forward, pay it forward to another group. So we'll be selecting another school to work with. And then today there was an announcement made, I'm sure you've probably seen it in the news or being tweeted out, that Bridgestone has agreed to donate $150,000 a year for the next 5 years to Music Makes Us. So that's an incredible gift. So.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank Ms. Spearing for bringing that to my attention. I'm going to do it again, point of personal privilege, and move my comments up because I will be handing the meeting over to my vice chair here shortly. But I wanted to take a moment to offer an apology. Actually, on behalf of the 9 of us, virtual 9 of us that sit here. And I know in recent weeks, it has seemed as though we have completely lost our minds, partially lost our focus, and I want to apologize for that. And I just want to say to all of us in this room, at this table, and the central office staff, that we need to get back to what our mission is and why we're here. As a board, we are here to hire a director, to create and manage a budget, and to monitor the performance of this district. 3 little things. Very little of that gets discussed, and very little of that has happened lately, but it's just those 3 things. And as a district, as a whole, teachers, central office staff, the director, is here to ensure that quality educational opportunities are available for all students. I know it's a few little words there, Mrs. Steele. I know there's a lot under that, but at the heart of it, that's it. That's all we're here to do. And until we do that, we will continue to look like 9 different people with 9 different foci. Oftentimes, that focus seems to be individuals within this district, and very rarely does it seem to be the students that we're here to serve. And that's getting a little old and a little bit frustrating. And I think it's rather ironic that it's 9 of us that sit here like the Supreme Court, because we often do 3 other things that are very different from budget, monitor, and hire. We throw out edicts to manage the actions of the central office. Surprisingly enough, that's not our job. We pass public judgment on the abilities of the staff and simply decide how people should do the jobs that they were hired to do. For that, I apologize. And my final apology goes to the fact that we spend the majority of our meetings talking about roughly 30 schools, charter schools and priority schools. That leaves about, I think somebody else did the math for me earlier today, 93% of our students that don't get addressed. 93% of the student population goes undiscussed, unmonitored, unsupported, everything under this cloud that we've allowed ourselves to get burdened under. Not that they're not important and not that those issues are not significant, but there are lots of forums where work is being done, discussions are being held, hard work is being done, and very hard decisions are being made under those 2 singular topics. But we got 93% of a district that is currently going ignored. I know we have 72 minutes of public participation facing us. A significant portion of it is going to focus on those 2 topics, and that's okay. That's the entitlement. That's what we allow for that to happen here. But I continue to challenge the 9 of us at this table and the central office staff to remember that we have 85,000 students, roughly, in this district that deserve the best that we have to give them. And we need to remember that we have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of resources to address the needs of all 85,000. So, as we prepare for public participation, I mentioned 72 minutes, I wasn't kidding. I'm going to remind you that you have 3 minutes. At the end of 3 minutes, you will hear, that's the sound, and you will be politely asked to cease your comments and the next person to come up. We'll call them in groups of 6, so please listen for your name and make your way towards the podium. Talisha Cobb, Beth Jocelyn Roth, John Haubenreich, Amy Felon, Susan Hawes, and Chris Lucas. Apologies for any mispronunciations.
Good evening. We'd like to thank you for letting us speak with you tonight. I'm Talisha Cobb, and joining me is Beth Roth. We are both on the leadership team of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. We are also active and involved MNPS parents with children in the Hillsborough cluster. Since Sandy Hook, there have been 88 school shootings. Some shootings, such as the most recent in Seattle, killed multiple students, while others involved the discharge of a weapon on school grounds. As parents, we are concerned anytime a gun is fired in or around a school. As parents, we are concerned anytime a gunman is anywhere close to a school. On September 17th, Leonard Embody walked up and down the sidewalk in front of Hillsborough High School at dismissal. He was wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a handgun and a hunting rifle. Although the police were notified, the school was not put on lockdown. The students were dismissed, leaving school through the front doors less than 100 yards from where Mr. Embody marched. Mr. Embody approached several students, handing them a homemade copy of the Second Amendment. Other students called their parents from inside the school, expressing fear in leaving the building while the gunman was out front. Parents were understandably distraught to receive such a call and incredibly upset that communication from the school nor MNPS officials was never initiated, either during or after this event. Per current Tennessee state law, Mr. Embody's actions on September 17th were legal. But school officials and police should be most concerned with putting our children's safety first. We don't release them into a situation where they might be shot. Through lockdown drills, we teach students to hide from gunmen inside a school. Dismissing kids where an armed gunman wearing a bulletproof vest is standing directly in front of the school, it sends a very confusing message to our children. Given the tragic history of school shootings, we have in this country asking teachers and students to make a judgment call about whether someone is a good guy with a gun or a bad guy with a gun is not a reasonable expectation. We are here today to express our deep concerns about how this was handled and to ask questions to those who are supposed to help keep our children safe. We feel this is an issue that should have been brought to the parents and to the community immediately by MNPS. We do not feel that ignoring this issue in hopes of it going away is in the best interest of our children. Beth will now address the questions that we have as concerned MNPS parents. Thank you.
The event on the 17th raised numerous concerns and questions, not only for me, but for a number of parents with whom I've spoken. As an MNPS parent, I've realized that I don't know what the criteria is for deciding to lock down a school. I searched the MNPS website for lockdown and found a description of the Office of Security and a link to the 2013-2014 Emergency Response and Crisis Management Plan, which led to an error message. What is the criteria administration uses to issue a school lockdown? Are schools only locked down if there are shots fired on or near a campus? Does a man wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a rifle not meet the criteria? And if not, why not? Is this information available to parents? What is the communication plan for parents when events like this happen? Was there an explanation for why there was no lockdown and why kids were dismissed? Mr. Embody is known for these kinds of open carry demonstrations and his desire to normalize the open carry of guns, especially long guns. He seeks attention from police and the media. Even though a reluctance to give him this attention is understandable, should we ever assume to know what is in the mind of a man walking around a school with a bulletproof vest and a rifle? Is it ever worth the risk to make such assumptions? Tennessee is one of 20 states with stand your ground laws. Many Tennesseans, many Nashvillians carry weapons, most of them concealed. Is there any concern that a situation such as the one with Mr. Embody could lead to another armed person assuming Embody's intentions were malicious and firing a shot at him, putting our children in the crossfire? Embody has stated that, quote, "A school is a prime place to be able to hand out my leaflets and educate children that guns aren't dangerous as people think they are. Certainly a man carrying a gun doesn't mean they're going to get shot." He's also publicly stated that he plans to go to other schools with his weapon to exercise his Second Amendment rights. Does MNPS currently have any proactive plan to deal with Mr. Embody should he approach another MNPS school? Again, we sincerely thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. We look forward to hearing from you and gaining a better understanding of MNPS's response to the September incident, the criteria used to issue lockdown orders, and plans for addressing Mr. Embody or any other gunmen who choose to walk around schools in the future. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Habenreich. I'm a parent in East Nashville. Wanted to come and speak to you tonight directly about the kids and the parents at Kirkpatrick Elementary School, at Inglewood Elementary School, at Bailey Middle, and at Jerry Baxter, and all the other schools in East Nashville that are crying out for our support and for our attention, and talk about how we get the conversation focused back on them and what they need. As I know you all have experienced, and all of us who've been wrapped up in this big debate have experienced, it's brought forth a lot of passion, some anger, a lot of miscommunications, a lot of people making accusations, many of them unfounded. It's been a lot of turmoil, and frankly, it's not that different from all the turmoil we've experienced over the past couple of years with respect to charter schools, Great Hearts, and approval of this and approval of that, and fights with the state. You know, we've been suffering through this kind of turmoil for years now, and all it does is distract us from those kids in those schools who are crying out for our support. And so I wanted to come today and address you and ask us all, and I'm committed personally to this, to to use this moment as a turning point, to refocus the conversation on what it needs to be focused on, and that is improving these schools. I'll say I was at the town hall event on Sunday in East Nashville. I sincerely regret how that happened and how it went down. Unfortunately, I was not very involved in the planning of it, but I'm part of East Nashville United, and we own that, and that's our fault. And there's not much more we can say about that. We regret it, and it didn't go like it should have. Especially it didn't go because parents in East Nashville weren't given the chance to ask questions and talk about what they wanted to talk about. I think that's the turning point. So the question is where we go from here. I'm extremely excited about the formation of the East Nashville Task Force. I'm committed to participating in it, doing whatever we can to make it be successful. And I wanted to raise 2 points, I think, going forward. Number one is the issue of school turnarounds and how we start thinking about those, because there are a lot of schools that need a lot of support. What I would put to you is that given all the turmoil we've had, all the arguments over charters, all the passionate parents on both sides, all the fighting, all the press and media, I would like to suggest to you tonight to think about bringing in an independent turnaround team to get this work done and establishing an independent turnaround fund. I'm going to be out of time for this, but I would love to talk to you more about that. I think it's an important way to go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy?
Hi, my name's Amy Phelan. I'm a parent of a child at Dan Mills. I'm actually going to put away what I was going to say. The other day, Sunday, Dr. Register did talk about the closing of Ross Elementary and turning that into a successful pre-K program. He did mention, closing some and turning some around. I'm really worried about, I want to know what happened to the kids who went to Ross. What did we do for those kids? Obviously, there were problems there, not just at the school, but they needed extra resources. They needed extra help. What happened to them? Just closing a school doesn't erase the kids that go to that school. They go to other schools. We need to focus on what happens to those children. We need resources for them. I'm a nurse. I'm a psychiatric nurse, so the patients I take care of, they're sick in some ways, but not physically ill. They're not at risk of dying anytime soon. But a critical care nurse, I'll handle like 6 patients. A critical care nurse would only handle 1 or 2 patients because those patients could die very easily. We need to do the same for our students and our schools that need more resources. We need to help them. They need more than other schools. At wealthy schools, the parents can come up with funds for PTO and donate, and that's something that happens at a lot of them, but the other schools don't have that money. So these schools really need help and focus, and I just hope that y'all will do that. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Susan Hawes, East Nashville resident and public school parent of a rising elementary school student, a rising middle school student, and next year a rising high schooler. Lucky me. I have 3 minutes to tell you it's taken me nearly a decade to learn and understand, and that is that choice is not always a choice, and option is rarely an option. I've also learned that the best thing we can do for our children, our neighborhoods, and our communities is to stop splintering our communities with more and more choices and return to neighborhood schools. I used to have great confidence in our schools. When my son started elementary school 8 years ago at the closest school to our home, a wonderfully diverse school that reflected our neighborhood, we committed fully in our resources, time, and community involvement. We considered it not just his school, but our family's school. Our middle child started there 3 years later, just as the neighborhood was really taking off, and now as our third child is preparing to enter kindergarten, just missing the sibling preference by 3 days, our chances of getting her into the school where her baby shower was held and where she spent her earliest days cooing underneath the library checkout desk are hovering around 50%. Our family school has become a school that is not welcoming to our whole family. And not just our family. Choice has taken my wonderfully diverse local school and turned it into an all-economically advantaged resource hoarder, leaving the surrounding schools to flounder. It does not reflect the neighborhood, but the select few who have the ability to maneuver through the complicated choice system. And the middle school situation has become the ultimate neighborhood divider. On our street alone, of the kids who attended elementary school together, they are now split among East, Head, Good Pasture, Bailey, J.T. Moore, Davidson Academy, Meigs, Harpeth Hall, and Isaac Litton. And those choices weren't made because of a desire for a choice, but because the lottery relegated these families to options with which they did not feel comfortable, a direct result of a system which tells us that great schools are not good enough. And the one and exhausting conversation we parents have these days, and I'm sure you as well, is the upcoming lottery, which we now call Selection Day, but we might as well call Roll the Dice Day. I've lost confidence in my investment, and I, like many parents in Metro, am not eager to invest my most precious assets into a risky market. Tell me that my children have a K-12 pathway where 3/4 of the kids will not leave after a year or two for the promise of a different choice across town, and I will give you everything I have, and I'll assure you of success within that school. Tell me every year will be a crapshoot, and I will give you back what you've given me. We want confidence, not choices. We want community, not a pre-med school for 10 to 13-year-olds or a charter school that changes location every 2 years. And my voice may resonate strongly with some, and it may come up hollow to others, but it is the voice of a dedicated public school parent with 2 children in Title I schools, one for which I am the parent volunteer coordinator for 1,300 students and their families. And next year I have a 3rd in a local Title I school, all 3 thriving because of dedicated faculty and a push for parent involvement. Give us time. Let us take care of our neighborhood. Don't come in and close schools down or replace them with more choices, which only lead us further down the rabbit hole. Help us get back to the community schools the majority of us grew up attending, because we can all agree that after decades of choice, it's simply not working. Thank you.
Am I on? I think Kim gave something. If the next 6 could go ahead and line up: Angelica Cooks Lucas, Jocelyn Cooks, Ruth Stewart, Rebecca Bracken, Eric Huth, and Jay Sanders. Is Angelica here? I guess he's not here. I guess not.
Thank you for that exercise. I am Angelica Cooks Lucas. I will be speaking on behalf of Christopher Lucas, my husband, Jocelyn Cooks, my daughter, and as well as the East Nashville community, where I have been a proud resident for 32 years. I'm not going to bore you long. I just want to just come up and just pretty much share my concerns about the state and the future of our schools. I have a pre-K student at Inglewood Elementary. I have a middle school student at Bailey, and I also have a 4th grader at Laughlin. I'm speaking today regarding our priority schools. We hear a lot about choice, we hear a lot about power, and it's pretty much a play on words. Inglewood, if you look at the definition, it exudes the definition of power. We do have the capability. We are competent. We do influence. We are innovative. We are strategic. We just need the time as well as the community input and help with us to actually do that. We do not want to just go ahead and turn over our school for some option that may not be a great fit for all of our students. What we would like is to actually sit down. Don't appease us. Don't say we have this task force and it's a hidden agenda behind it. Listen to us. The residents here in this community have been here for years. We know about the culture of that school and of our students and the future of these kids. And so we want that time to share with you our vision and our goals. We would like to collaborate. Let's not just have the same model of schools just all around. Let's be diverse. We hear that a lot. Let our schools reflect that, and let's all work together. Let's put aside blue shirts, orange shirts, charter, traditional public, and zone, and focus on the kids. That's what we are here for, and that's what we would like to do. And we just need your help. It's teamwork will actually make the dream work, and that will equal power, which our choice will be heard. Thank you.
Ruth?
Hi, I'm Ruth Stewart. I'm a Metro School parent. First, I want to thank you for coming to the ENU event on Sunday afternoon. The meeting was designed to bring the community up to speed on the proposed changes to East Nashville schools. Our intent was to give a timeline, talk about previous promises, and why process matters, and then move on to what may happen on December 1st before the advisory committee has had a chance to do their work. We know the meeting was heated, and we regret that. The meeting certainly demonstrated the level of anxiety parents feel about the proposed changes. Many East Nashville families are facing decisions that must be made by early December, and they are there to get help with understanding their options. I hope those with decision-making capacity will continue to dialogue with parents with transparency. To that end, we thank you, Dr. Register, for establishing the advisory committee and delaying implementation of your plan until May. Second, let me ask you to maintain an open and transparent process as you form your decisions around the looming December 1st date, when, as we understand it, a decision will be made about where charter operator KIPP will be placed. Top-down, hostile takeovers of schools that have been left to languish without resources needed to make headway is not the right way to proceed. Englewood Elementary, a priority school in East Nashville, did receive some additional resources just a couple of weeks ago. Thank you for providing the resources the principal requested. Englewood parents have spoken, and they want to keep their zone school with plentiful resources and stable leadership. The desire of this neighborhood should not be ignored. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rebecca?
She's not here.
Go ahead, Jay. Oh, Eric, I'm sorry. I will. It's fine. Eric, yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Oh, okay. Good evening, board members and Dr. Register. 2 months ago, I spoke to you in support of Englewood Elementary School. I knew then that the faculty and PTO was poised to make great strides this year. But I didn't know who else shared that feeling other than my wife and a handful of others. Now I know there's a large group of caretakers and community members who believe KIPP is a bad fit for Englewood. I know there are senior MNPS administrators and board members who believe Englewood has the capacity to turn itself around. I know there are charter leaders and Stratford cluster principals who believe KIPP is asking for problems if they move into Englewood. I know Dr. Register and Randy Dow would like to make KIPP's pathway as geographically and pedagogically sound as Englewood's is currently to Lytton and Stratford. I know Englewood needs a family school coordinator to augment its new tutoring services, community partners, and expanding PTO. I know that our new assistant principal wants to educate the children of Englewood for more than 3/4 of a year. I know there are community leaders and Chamber of Commerce Education Report Card Committee members who believe Englewood will thrive with a new education model, not a KIPP conversion. I know that Dr. Gentry wants the board to require vendors to serve the needs of the board, and taking that a step further, we at Englewood are asking MNPS, our vendor of education, to serve our community in a way that best fits our needs and wants. I know there are enough schools in East Nashville to last for quite a while. I know that Englewood Elementary School is too big for a whole school conversion, even if we wanted one. I know people are voting with their feet to come to Englewood because we have a very high out-of-zone student population. I know that KIPP is currently having a minimally advertised parent meeting at the community center directly behind my school. Lastly, I know that the students are finding challenges and reaping benefits at Englewood. Just ask my first grader, who a couple of days ago said, "I'm pretending to be Dr. Jesse Register, and I will save my school and not turn it into a charter." Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Eric?
You now have a modern flash video website. Was it really a good idea, however, to make the injury on the job policy and the evaluation grievance procedure with its notoriously short 15-day window disappear? The MNPS culture of fear, Dr. Register, is alive in the threats teachers hear every day from your autonomous principals who say, I can put you on an intervention plan. It's alive every spring when principals violate the TEL code survey distribution procedures or call teachers into faculty meetings to complete those surveys in their presence. It's alive when older teachers hear they may be shoved in front of time clocks in the spring, when they hear they are no longer teachers, people, or individuals, that they're now capital, a commodity to be traded, pushed out, set aside in the name of quality. The 1998 MNPS School Improvement Plan, which resulted in unitary status, created our enhanced option schools and provided extra pay for teachers in hard-to-work schools. TIF grants have paid bonuses for teachers achieving highly in some priority schools. In May of 2013, the Tennessee Department of Education announced signing and retention bonuses of up to $7,000 for level 5 teachers working in our priority schools. If these bonus programs haven't produced results, how is rebranding bonuses as the MNPS Teacher Corps with a shiny new logo going to be more successful? Proponents of the current teacher evaluation model, which is referred to as the team model, extol its virtues, but I want you to understand some of its shortcomings. Team judges teachers' worth based on tests that are often not aligned with the curriculum they are required to teach. Team judges some teachers based on the test data of students they do not teach. Team often uses TVAS data, which is a 3-year average statistical estimate of student performance, not a single-year performance measure. Team is not a research-based evaluation model. It is a political, corporate-style reform strategy imposed on educators. And finally, MNPS really does need to beef up its accountability structures related to the implementation of the team model. Now we have RTII, which has caused many teachers great concern about the impact on their time to teach and ultimately their evaluation scores. I'd like to thank Dottie Critchlow for all she's done, and I just hope that more people in MNPS can help us help students and teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huth. I'm going to go ahead and call up the next 6. Randall Bowens, Jamila Hollins, Ben Jordan, Kim Whitaker, Chris Moth, and Aaron Kelberg. Randall? No Randall? Jamila? No Jamila? Ben Jordan? 3 for 3. Kim Whitaker? Thank you.
Hi. My name is Kim Whitaker. I'm an East Nashville resident, educator, and the parent of a student at East End Prep. This time last year, I was touring schools and sitting in on classroom instruction, excited to determine which school would be the best fit for my child. Sadly, even though the list of optional schools was long, many did not offer a high-quality educational experience. Therefore, in reality, the list of true options was very short. I am thankful for the ability to choose, and in the end, I was able to find an exceptional school for my child in my neighborhood. Schools like Easton Prep show us that all students can achieve academic success regardless of race or socioeconomic background. It is also a place where my child's spirit is nurtured, her needs are met on a social and emotional level, and most importantly, it's a place where she is loved. This is what every child in East Nashville deserves. 1,575 is the number of children attending priority schools in East Nashville. According to data from the Tennessee Department of Education, only 249 of these students are reading on grade level. In the 2 elementary priority schools in my neighborhood, fewer than 2 out of 10 children can read on grade level. The same is true for proficiency in math. The numbers are staggering. How is this acceptable? Should it really be so controversial to believe that schools need to be held accountable for the academic success of their students? Those of us who support some of the bold changes in Dr. Register's proposal have been accused of playing crisis politics. I don't know what rational person could have knowledge of these statistics and not see the current state of our schools as a crisis. This is a crisis because we are lacking quality schools. This is a crisis because all families do not have equitable access to the school of their choosing. This is a crisis because children in priority schools should not have to wait another year or longer before they see the changes necessary to improve their schools. The longer people are allowed to delay and attempt to block dramatic changes, the more children will suffer. These children need action now. More high-quality options are the first piece in this puzzle. In a neighborhood where 40% of parents choose to send their child to an MNPS school other than their own school, it seems only fair to open this opportunity to all families. Lack of transportation should not hinder a parent's ability to advocate for their child and to find the school that best fits their child's needs. Dr. Register's plan would provide equitable access to choice, which would empower parents to allow them to realize what is truly possible for their child. I strongly urge you, Dr. Register, and members of the board to not delay and stay focused on the children and do what is right for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whitaker. Mr. Moff?
Good evening. I'm Chris Moth, and all my children are now in Metro Public Schools. I have a 9th grader at Hillsborough High, a 5th grader at J.T. Moore, and a kindergartner at Percy Priest. In the current political climate, it is a miracle that my children can still walk, bike, or ride your bus to our neighborhood schools. It's a luxury which is vanishing across the country, and I start by thanking you for that. I'm here to share some personal thoughts on the real estate proposal for Hillsborough High School. As our economy came out of the 2008 crisis, Mayor Dean proposed a property tax increase to add $100 million to Nashville's bonding capacity. It was not the $1 billion that we need to get to everything on your punch list, but it seemed like a solid start. Several of us parents went down to the city council meeting and stood in the long line to make 3-minute speeches. I asked the council to please raise my property taxes. I said, look, Montgomery Bell had a $100 million campaign for their 800 boys. How can we hesitate to raise $100 million for our 80,000 children in MNPS? Well, the speech worked, and my property taxes went from $6,000 a year to $7,000. I figured a new Hillsborough High building had to be around the corner. After all, we've been pushing it back for almost a decade. Fast forward to today, and now you're talking of selling acreage in front of Hillsborough for $50 million to fund a high-rise, high-density school rebuild. What happened to the property tax increase? Selling the frontage of Hillsborough can't be the right move. The proposed plan cuts current green space from almost a third of the land area to a tiny fraction. An athletic field would be on top of a parking garage. I love visiting Manhattan, but I prefer to raise my family in Nashville. As our city explodes in population, we must start to think differently about our finances. Each child in Metro costs about $10,000 a year to educate. Operating a high school with 2,000 children costs $20 million a year. The capital budget for a new high school is only 2 or 3 times that amount. Over the 75-year lifespan of a building, that capital budget turns out to be little more than $1 a day per child. When did $1 a day become out of reach? In my neighborhood, we are replacing $500,000 houses with 2 $750,000 houses on the same lot. A 17-story tower is going up with 286 apartments in it, very near the high school. Our homes no longer have yards for recreation, but our property taxes our tax base is tripling. Surely we can find $1 a day per child to preserve green space at our neighborhood high school. MBA would never sell their frontage, neither would any school in Williamson County. We need to reduce the exodus of families from MNPS and keep our tax base strong. Cooping up our kids in a high-rise is not the right direction. Let's join together and demand that our city council retains our school properties intact. Nashville must not sell our children's future because we lack courage to find $1 a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moff. Aaron? All right, the next 6 are Yolanda Shaw, Charlie Utley, Brett Withers, Lisa Mingrone, Melody Vernon Katz, and Bill Carey. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Yolanda? Okay.
It's me. Hello, my name is Yolanda Shaw, and before I read, I want to let everyone know that I am a mother of 6. Yes, I am 29 years old. I should not have 6 kids, but I do. 5 are currently enrolled in Metro schools, 1 in charter, 1 at Meg's, and 3 of them are at, oh Lord, they used to be at Ruby Major, that's another thing, and now they are at Thomas Edison. Okay, my personal experience, I do not feel like all children are receiving the same education in these schools. I'm for all schools, Metro, charter, all schools. My son, who is at Meg's right now, he attended J.E. Moss. When he attended J.E. Moss, which is also a Title I funding school, and no, I do not live in East Nashville, but I was raised in East Nashville. I have 2 kids that go to school in East Nashville. I have a little brother who goes to Kirkpatrick right now in East Nashville. I have 2, a niece and a nephew who attended Ross. For someone who said, where did those kids go? They attended Ross and now they are at Caldwell Elementary. The charter schools and choices, I feel, are the best things for us right now. I went to Title I funding schools, and the current curriculum that's in place right now set for these children are not working. It's not working at all. Change needs to come, and the people in East Nashville need to get together and realize that. I'm sorry, but we do need change. Not only in those schools, but in other schools. But right now, we're focusing on East Nashville. I'm letting you all know that. It's so much to be said, but I just ask people to just please come together and fight for these schools. Charter, Metro, all schools. I need my kids, everyone else's kids who can't afford to send their kids to private school. All kids deserve a high quality education. All kids. My children, I have 4 boys, and I do not want my boys to be lost in the system anywhere. I push my kids as hard as I can, and I need to know that all schools are for my kids, and I'm going to push my kids the way I do. I need to know that there are good teachers there who are for my children, and not just because it's a job for them. They're there and they really don't want to be there. If you don't want to be there, then I ask you, I beg you to please leave. That's my opinion. I would urge you all to just please get a system in order as quickly as possible, the best system for all children. I have a child that attends charter school right now. Right now, I feel is the best thing for him. I drive from Antioch in the morning time to get 2 kids on East Nashville side by 8 o'clock, then I have to be at work and stand on my feet all day. And it's all for my children.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Charlie Utley. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the school board. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Charlie Utley. I attend Isaac Litton Middle School, where I'm in 8th grade. My parents chose Isaac Litton because it is our neighborhood school. This has been a wonderful academically. It has been nothing short of perfect, and I'm not just saying this in hopes my teachers are listening. Socially, it's nothing less than a typical middle school, minus, that is, the fakeness of bullying. Overall, it's a very well-run school with a wonderful principal. I can't say that about my previous experiences at Boys Preparatory of Nashville, a charter school. Academically, Boys Prep tried, but it could not succeed due to the enormous responsibility on the teachers. They had behavioral problems in the classroom. Socially, I felt very pressured because I was nothing like the other kids at school. I didn't seem to like many of my classmates who struggled academically and who really wanted to be challenged. I think that part of the reason why I felt this way was because my school did not have a good feeling of community. Many of my classmates rode the bus hours a day, leaving neighborhoods as far as Antioch to travel all the way into Madison. The school went through 2 principals in just 1 year and even went a long time without having a principal. There was a lot of teacher turnover, 5 to be exact. I had a hard time getting to know my teachers, and basically, I'm really glad that I made it through the year. But I'm also glad that Boys Prep closed. That was my first year in public school after having been homeschooled my entire life. It was a rough year, especially for another one of my classmates who took his own life at the beginning of the school year. Does that normally happen in schools? I hope I never have to attend another classmate's funeral. This past week, I filled out paperwork to attend my neighborhood school, Stratford STEM Magnet High, where I will study biotechnology. I plan to take care of the strong academic STEM programs that this school has to offer, just like my older brother Jack. Jack was not able to be here this evening to talk about the 2 wonderful years he has had at Stratford. He had student council and chess club, so I guess you're just stuck here with me hearing from the less geeky of the 2. I would ask that you do everything you can to encourage and promote our neighborhood schools so that kids like me can attend schools that they live close to. That is what will continue to make our neighborhood great, because everybody knows what would make a good neighborhood is having good neighborhood schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Utley.
Hello, my name is Lisa Mongraw, and I live in East Nashville, and I have a child who attends the Ross Early Learning Center program, and I would like to extend my thanks to all of you for the work that you've done in establishing that program and the other Early Learning Center programs in Nashville. I would also like to extend my thanks to you, Dr. Register, as I know you're resigning for all of the wonderful work that you've done when you came into our system to improve it. I also would like to say that I have a few concerns about how we're moving forward as a school system. I think that we need a drastic reduction in the high-stakes standardized testing that's happening in our school system at this point. I think we have so many of them being implemented and taking so much of our students' time. It starts in kindergarten with standardized testing, and it carries forward at every grade level. On top of that, the surveys and the multiple things that the kids are spending time with just to prepare for all of those tests is just unreasonable, and it is not sustainable. I would like to address this idea of the size of our schools and our graduation rates. Our schools have a lower per pupil cost, a lower cost per graduate if they are smaller schools. They have a higher cost per graduate if they are larger schools. So instead of looking at the cost per pupil, let's look at the cost per graduate. And when we talk about our under-enrolled and our underutilized schools, let's be creative about the use of those facilities that are just simply too large, instead of filling them with bodies and students that will create an unsafe environment and a poor learning environment. I would also like to address the idea that we're going to be bringing in veteran teachers to our priority schools. I think that sounds great, but who's going to fill their shoes in the schools they leave? I would like to see that the teachers who come in to take those veteran spots and the 100 teachers that we have in our school system that are newer teachers or less seasoned teachers be given additional supports in their classrooms, additional resources to work with, additional education and training, support from their school community, Metro, the community at large, and our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mingram.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Melody Vernon Katz. I'm an East Nashville resident. My child is zoned for Rosebank Elementary, and he attends East End Prep. I'm also a charter wife. I'm not here to indict MNPS because I know that the men and women of MNPS are child-centered and have a growth mindset, which according to Dr. Carol Dweck, who wrote Mindset, is the essential element for achievement and success. I am here because I believe the duty of this board is to assure that all students have access to high-quality education independent of a family's address. I'm here because I believe the duty I'm here because I believe that the board should be trying to move MNPS from good, which is seen at just below 50% proficiency, to great at 100% proficiency. If we confront the brutal facts, we have far too many schools that are failing. That within these schools, there are people that believe that it's the parents or the students and not the system. That ideology has to change. Some of our most economically vulnerable families are already choosing schools by having their children live with an aunt, uncle, cousin, adult sister or brother, or grandparent, which is further dissolving the family institution. There is an elephant in the room, and that is fear. Fear of change, a fear that by giving families more school choices gives them power, and what you give power to has power over you. I'm here to ask the board to perform a self-audit when it comes to the changes that are being proposed. Will you have a growth mindset and embrace change, or a fixed mindset and avoid them? Will you have a growth mindset when it comes to the success of charter schools by being inspired, or a fixed mindset and feel threatened? Schools like East End Prep have shown that no matter the socioeconomic status, circumstance, or family address, that students can in fact succeed. I'm here to ask you to view charters in the same light as traditional schools. As of right now, there's a divide. Charters provide a progressive model when it comes to education. Why not work together to provide our children with the best instructional and educational tools available from both institutions? You must make a choice to take a chance, or things will never change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vernon-Katz.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Brett Withers, and I am speaking to you tonight. I'm not a parent, and I think that actually gives me a unique perspective because I'm a neighborhood president and I'm a neighborhood leader. I'm the president of the Eastwood Neighborhood Association, which is located just north of Lockland Springs. I'm not speaking to you in an official capacity for them, but I'm speaking to you as a neighborhood leader. And I want to talk about how having a complete school network of all good schools is so vitally important to our neighborhoods. Right now, in my neighborhood, we are zoned to Rosebank Elementary, Bailey Middle School, and Stratford High School are our zone schools. We happen to also be in the geographic priority zone for Lockland Design. We are also in the geographic priority zone for East Middle and East High, and there are quite a few charter schools as well that also provide some really great options to our families. And those things are blessings to our neighborhood, that we have quite a few good options that folks can send their children to. But I want to get back to what Dr. Gentry mentioned earlier, is that we need to talk about, we have a lot of conversation and I think sometimes disagreement about the charter schools and priority students, but we need to look out for the 93% of students that don't get as much conversation. We really do need to make sure that all of our students are able to attend a good school. As a neighborhood, we are constantly evaluated actually based on what our zone schools are. When a family is looking to move into a neighborhood, that's what they look at, is what are the zone schools, how are they rated. That's really important to the many families that are moving to East Nashville and wanting to stay here with their students. It's great that we have some good options that they can go to, but it's crucial that our zone schools are also really strong, that all of our schools are strong. And I think that's something that all of us in this room can agree on. So one of the things that I want to speak to you about is, please continue the great work that you're doing looking at our magnet schools and our charter schools and those great choices that are there. I think that a lot of those processes for evaluating those schools are already sound, and obviously people are taking advantage of those options. But I want you to please also focus on all of the rest of our schools as well. Please do not wait for our zone schools until they are a priority school to begin giving them resources that they need to bring their scores up to great. It's not acceptable that our zone schools are just barely above priority status. We really do have to have all of them good. I do agree that choice is power, but I think that choice is the most power when all of your choices are good choices. And I think that's also something we can all agree on. And I really look forward to the task force getting started. I will not be on that, but I'm really glad that I was one of the folks who worked for that, and I look forward to those parents and administrators working together with you on some great solutions to that problem. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Withers.
Yes, my name is Bill Carey. I am a Nashville resident, and I'm the parent of two boys, both of whom attend Metro Public Schools. I'm also the founder and executive director of an organization called Tennessee History for Kids. Tennessee History for Kids is in its 10th year. I originally started it because teachers in Metro asked me to help them find resources to teach Tennessee history. About 8,000 teachers statewide use Tennessee History for Kids. We have a website, we have booklets and other things. But I'm here today to talk to something that is unique to Nashville. Monday and Tuesday, December 15th and 16th of 2014, is the anniversary of what may be the most important thing to ever happen in Nashville, Tennessee. Exactly 150 years ago on those dates occurred the Battle of Nashville during the Civil War. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about this because I'll only have 3 minutes. I do have an article that I wrote up that I downloaded from my website about the Battle of Nashville, and I do want to say 4 things about the battle before I tell you why I wanted to talk to you about it. First of all, it was the last major battle of the Civil War, or at least the last major battle of the western frontier. After the Battle of Nashville, the Confederate Army of Tennessee fled south to Mississippi, never to fight again. Second of all, more African Americans died fighting at the Battle of Nashville than in any other battle of the Civil War. I'm going to say that again. More African Americans died fighting at the Battle of Nashville than in any other battle of the Civil War. Third thing, the Battle of Nashville is the least preserved battlefield in the southeast United States, and that's easily said. The battle occurred on what is now the Green Hills and Oak Hills parts of town, the current Vanderbilt and Belmont campuses. Also, there are several public schools that are located right on the campus. There may be dead bodies in those campuses for all we know. Places like Overton High School, West End Middle School, Aiken, John Trotwood Moore are all on the battlefield. Finally, thousands of people were killed or injured at the Battle of Nashville. For all we know, some of them may still be buried under a road or house somewhere because there are a lot of missing people, and there also actually is a mass grave that we never know where it is. But the reason I wanted to tell you this is because in spite of the importance of this anniversary, as things stand now, this will apparently be the least honored anniversary of any battle in the entire Civil War, sesquicentennial, certainly in terms of student involvement. As of right now, to the best of my knowledge, not a single principal or teacher has any plans to do a field trip that day or acknowledge it in any manner. In fact, everyone I talk to doesn't even know that there is an anniversary of a battle. I do want to make it clear, I'm not blaming this on Metro Public Schools. I'm blaming this on the local history community, which has geared the entire sesquicentennial of the battle to the weekend before the anniversary, Saturday and Sunday, not the Monday and Tuesday of the anniversary. We still have plenty of time to do something about this, so I'd like to ask Metro Public Schools to make their principals and teachers aware that this anniversary is coming up. As a veteran, I can tell you that this means a lot more to me than Veterans Day does. In any case, my organization, which is well known in the public school system, will gladly help with suggestions of things to do that day. There are field trips that can be planned and possible speakers that can be brought in. I also have this article that I was hoping to distribute to the board, and I'll leave it with someone.
Cameo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. All right. That officially ends public participation. Thank you so much to all participants. We'll give them just a minute if you all want to move out. And once everyone settles down, we'll start again. Thank you. You ready?
Pull your Lisa.
Yeah.
Pull your mic just a little bit closer.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Exactly. All right. We're going to go ahead and move on then to governance, and specifically our consent agenda. Thank you for agreeing to read that, Ms. Pierce.
Okay. We have the approval of minutes, 8/21/2014 special call meeting. Recommended approval of contract for engineering services for prototype lighting upgrades at McGavock High School Auditorium, MP&E Engineering LLC. Recommended approval of contract for architectural services for the Bransford Health Center, Jack Freeman and Associates. Recommended approval of Amendment D for contract extension and compensation adjustments for design and construction management services, Harry International, Inc. Recommended approval of designer supplement number 1 for the new Antioch Cluster Elementary School, Gould Turner Group. Recommended approval of change order number 1 for fire safety upgrades at McGavock High School, Carrie G. Campbell, Inc. Awarding of purchases and contracts, BAC Paving Company, Inc., CDW Government, Central State Bus Sales, Inc., Cumberland International Truck, Inc., Epic Hearing Healthcare, iMed Vision Care, LLC, the Library Corporation, University of Oregon, and the recommended approval of requests for compulsory attendance waiver.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as read. Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of approving the consent agenda as read?
Aye.
Any ayes? And it is approved. The ayes have it. The motion carries. All right. The next item, recommended approval of revisions of BDR5, Board Director Relationship.
I move that we adopt changes to board policy BDR5 as modified at our most recent policy governance meeting.
Second.
Terrific. Those in favor of approving?
Aye.
Thank you. Any nays? All right. Motion carries.
We have approved the revisions of BDR5, board director relationship, and then number 3, our BEP funding resolution. Ms. Shepherd.
Madam Vice Chair. I want to present to you this resolution for BEP funding. Whereas on November 1st, 2014, the Basic Educational Program Review Committee, the committee annual report and the BEP report was published with recommendations for action by the legislature. And whereas the BEP report indicates that the recommendation of the committee that school districts receive funding for 12 months of insurance premiums was ranked as formula improvement recommendation number 1 in the BEP report, and whereas the BEP report's support of Governor Haslam's goal of becoming the fastest improving state in teacher salaries during his time in office and increasing the BEP salary component was ranked as formula improvement number 2, recommendation number 2 in the BEP report, and whereas the BEP report notes a significant gap between the actual average salary paid by Tennessee LEAs, which is $50,116, and the amount funded in the BEP instructional salary component, which is $40,447, and whereas the BEP report had previously stated, quote, in an effort to meet the goal of becoming the fastest improving state in the nation in terms of student achievement, the BEP Review Committee recognizes the need to create an environment that is attractive to highly effective teachers, end quote. And whereas the BEP report continues, quote, compensation is an integral component to creating this environment, end quote. And whereas the committee has stated, quote, we believe that to meet the student academic outcomes necessary to attain our pre-K to job goals, recruiting and retaining teachers into education rather than other occupations is essential for success, end quote. And whereas on the 2013 National Assessment of Educational Progress, Tennessee students made the largest gains in the country in 4th and 8th grade reading, and whereas Tennessee 4th and 8th graders math test scores gains outpaced every other state, and whereas Tennessee was only one of 3 jurisdictions in the nation that saw increases in both tested subjects in both tested grades, and whereas continuing to build on the historic achievement of school districts across the state, including Davidson County, as supported by the unprecedented improvement in the NAEP scores, the only nationally representative assessment of what students know and can do in various subject matters, is an integral component in improving the competitive position of Tennessee nationally and internationally. And whereas investing in improving public education is the only strategic investment the state can make that can yield positive results in all the following areas. 1, reducing poverty and the number of citizens on TennCare rolls. 2, increasing a highly skilled workforce to meet the demands of the increasingly competitive global environment. 3, increasing state tax revenues by attracting new industry, increasing personal incomes and spending by creating more jobs and increasing property values. 4, reducing crime rates statewide. And 5, improving the quality of life for all Tennesseans. And whereas modifications recommended in the BEP report would have a positive effect on teachers in Davidson County, this board fully supports those modifications to the BEP funding formula. And whereas, based on FY 2014 data, by the state adopting and funding the aforementioned recommendations, all Metro Nashville Davidson public schools, including the ASD and all MNPS schools, would share proportionately based on student enrollment in the approximately an additional $39.9 million annually for increases in teacher salaries, approximately $13.9 million after full implementation of the BEP 2.0 funding formula, and approximately $3.8 million annually to cover the 2 months extra of insurance premiums. And whereas those modifications to the BEP funding formula would also address all of the aforementioned positive outcomes, and the total amount of all BEP funding improvements only represents the equivalent of less than 2% of the overall state budget for 2014-2015. Now be it resolved that the Metropolitan Nashville Board of Education fully supports the following: that the BEP funding formula be modified to provide for 12 months of funding of insurance premiums, that the state salary component for teacher salaries be increased by $10,000, and that all other BEP funding improvements recommended by the BEP committee be adopted and funded. Be it further resolved, a copy of this resolution shall be sent to Governor Bill Haslam, Commissioner of Education Kevin Huffman, members of the Metropolitan Nashville Legislative Delegation, the Metropolitan Nashville Council, members of the BEP Review Committee, and members of the Coalition of Large City Schools. Madam Vice Chair, I move that we adopt the resolution as read.
Second. Any discussion? All right. It is moved and seconded to adopt the resolution as read. Ayes? All in favor? Sorry. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Motion carries. We will adopt the BEP funding resolution as read. Thank you all. So now we're moving to our reports, standing reports. Dr. Register?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have the pleasure of giving you an update on our model pre-K program expansion. And we have a couple of people who will participate in the presentation. I want to ask Lisa Wiltshire to come forward and get the presentation started.
Well, good evening. Tonight, we would like to provide you with an update on our early learning centers, Ross, Bordeaux, and Casa Azafran. And specifically, we invited our partners at the Peabody Research Institute at Vanderbilt University to present you with an overview of the assessments they are conducting on our early learning center programs. They will report results from the student assessments that were conducted in September, as well as the timeline for the remainder of the school year. We partnered with PRI so they could provide us with relevant and meaningful data on the progress and challenges of our model program development. Through this partnership, we're looking at two things. One, how much growth are we seeing in our pre-K students this year across developmental domains? And two, what are those classroom practices that are contributing to positive student outcomes? PRI is an ideal partner in this initiative because of their extensive experience and expertise in early childhood, as well as the fact that they are leading the statewide study of voluntary pre-K in the state of Tennessee. We are learning a great deal from our partnership, and we are excited to share some of that learning with you tonight. And with that, I would like to welcome Dale Farron, who is the Senior Associate Director of the Peabody Research Institute and Professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning and Psychology and Human Development at Vanderbilt. And with Dale this evening is Kim Nesbitt, who is a Research Associate at PRI, and Dina Metter, who is Program Manager at PRI.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I have to tell you, first off, before we start this, that what we've embarked upon here is fairly unique around the country. This is a true partnership. It's meant to be an iterative design. It's meant to be not a final evaluation where people come in at the very end and then say yay or nay. It's meant to be helpful as the program develops, because you don't open your door and be a model. You have to learn to be a model. So I don't know that you can really see this, but we have a whole, I think this was actually something you may have seen before, but we have a whole process of collecting data and then feeding it back. And part of the reason we can do that is because Dina Metter, who is here, has developed a system by which we collect all our data through iPads and tablet computers. And Kim Nesbitt has developed a system by which we can get those data back to teachers almost immediately, or to coaches and directors within a few weeks of their being collected, so there's not this long delay. So what you see there is a process of collecting information on the individual children and It's been quite fun. And then we're in the process right now of doing our first observations in the classrooms. The information about the test results will be provided to the teachers by the end of this week, and a system I'll tell you about in a minute. The information from their observations will be provided to them in December, and then they have January to think about all that information, and then we'll be back in February to observe again and give them that information back. So at least they can measure their progress along the way in terms of developing these models that we all like to see. We chose our child assessments very carefully. These are not group tests. From the children's point of view, these are games that we do with them individually with lots of stickers and lots of smiles. So what we've done is chosen areas that relate to Common Core, the Common Core expectancies that you would see at the end of kindergarten and first grade. So they're areas of language, literacy, math, self-regulation. Those are the 4 areas that we're working on. I'd be happy to tell you about any of those if you want to hear them, because lots of them are quite fun. The initial results have all been summarized, and what's really interesting about what's going on in these 3 hubs is that we have scores that are slightly above average, not above average altogether, but above what you might see in an urban school system, because we have a great range of children being served in these schools. Now that's interesting from this point of view, which is that what we're going to provide teachers by the end of this week, first of next week, is a way to go into their own classrooms and pull up information about their particular classrooms that's organized for them to tell them how many children do you have who are really scoring well in an area, and how many children do you have who might need some help in a particular area, and can you engineer some peer teaching so that you're not always the center of the teaching, but that children are helping each other. So that's a website that Dina is developing that will be up and running, and maybe somebody will invite you to come take a look. So we are in their classrooms starting now, and starting last week actually, and we send 2 people in at a time. One person is looking at it from the top. They're very quiet, though. We know how to melt into the background. So one person's looking at it from the top down. How is time being spent? How much time is going toward transitions, toward downtime? What kind of content is being covered? And then we're also looking at it sort of what we call from the bottom up. We look at individual children and their teachers and the kinds of interactions they're having. And all of those data can be summarized and will be provided back to the teachers by the first 2 weeks of December. So this is just a final model. This is what software people call and engineering people call an iterative design or a design-based research, which is that you collect data, you give it back as quickly as possible, and the coaches, and it's one thing to collect evidence, credible evidence. It's another thing to have people who know how to work with that evidence when you give it to them. So we're counting on the coaches and the directors to work with the teachers to know what to do with this evidence to actually work in their classrooms to make changes. We'll go back to see if those changes are being effected and doing what they want them to do, give them those data back and let them try, keep going. So it'll be a circle that will continue to inform itself. It's unique. I don't know any other place in the country that's doing this. In fact, when Greg Duncan, I just lost the name of our Secretary of Education. Yes, his name is Duncan, but that's right, I was just with a Greg Duncan. That's Arnie Duncan. So when he was here, he said, well, who else is doing this? And we said, we don't know anybody else is doing this. And so he was very excited. So we'll be very excited if we see if this works. So we hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. And with that, we can open it up for questions if you have any questions.
Go ahead. Do you have a question? No, I don't have a question. I was just going to say I think this is fabulous, and I'd love to see us doing this in all of our schools. This is a wonderful process.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
I do have a question on, do you all have plans to show the data on the internal evaluation that MNPS did on the pre-K program? I'm just looking at the intro and the background that was given in the board packet.
Yes, this is really the first assessment or evaluation of the pre-K programs. I think that what you're looking at is referring to some data that looked at only 6 classrooms, federally funded classrooms in Metro, but it was not valid statistical data and it was not a research study. So this is really the first of its kind here.
Well, I think just the other question is, this is exciting. I love the model. I love what you're doing. This is great. And just to know, I think, was it the Vanderbilt study that showed that some of the pre-K gains might be lost by the end of kindergarten? And I may have missed this when I stepped out. Are there plans to make sure that our kindergartens are strengthened to make sure that those gains aren't lost, they're holding and built upon? So are you linking up to the kindergarten on that?
Yeah, and
absolutely. We're watching for the results. We'll do the same thing. Dale has shared the research with all elementary principals, and we've had those conversations in professional development on what this model should look like as it moves up.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. A couple of comments and questions. I think it's interesting that our scores are slightly above what our expectations would be for our urban district. Can you give us more ideas about why you think that's true?
Well, you should speak to whom you enroll.
Yeah, I think that what we are seeing is, and what Vanderbilt's pointed out to us, is a wide range, which I think is reflective of the students that we have enrolled in our programs. We have a diverse student body at all 3 centers, the most diverse at Ross in terms of income and ethnicity. And so, and then we also have a significant percentage of students, for instance, at Casa Azafran, who speak English as a second language, who are just now learning English. So I think we've got such a broad and deep mix that may be reflected in some of the initial assessment results.
But I think there's another point which I think people haven't taken note of. Parents have gotten the message about literacy in the early years, and so you have, there are only 26 letters, so you have a lot of kids who are actually getting their letters early, and some of those the early items on these tests are these very basic skills. And what you want to see is whether some of these language scores will go up through the model pre-K.
Mm-hmm. But you think we're getting the kids that most need the program as well? I mean, we know we have a lot of poverty and a lot of disadvantaged students, and I just want to be sure that we're making every effort to get the kids that most need this intervention or this.
Yes, absolutely, and that's a priority, and that is something that we're constantly examining now for next year to balance really meeting the needs of those students who most need this, but not having segregated schools and classrooms, and really thinking of being thoughtful about diversity as well.
Yeah. And then my other question is, when you go into the classroom, about how long does that observation take place?
I just did one yesterday. So I got to the school at 7:30 and I left at 3:30.
So it's all day. You're actually in the classroom all day. That's fantastic. Okay. Great.
Yes, right. I was very tired.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
I've asked to say a word. I want to thank Dr. Farron and Peabody Research Institute for being great partners with us in developing this. And I can't help but say this. If you impressed Secretary Duncan, it's a great time to do that, since they're acting on approving our grant request now. At this time to expand our pre-K program next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll say one other thing. I hope that before long, and Lisa and I have talked about this, I want to set up a time to invite board members to stop by. You can stop by at any time, but we really would like for you to come by and see what we're doing in the models, and maybe we can arrange a time for a drop-in. Lisa, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, we've discussed that, and the directors and teachers are very eager to have all of you come visit. And in fact, there's going to be a Thanksgiving luncheon at Ross Early Learning Center, and it's happening next Thursday and Friday. And so the director of Ross really wanted me to extend an invitation, and she'll have a formal invitation coming to you if you can attend that. It would be a wonderful time to be with the students as well as the families, and then come see those classrooms as well.
So it would be great, and I ask a question, how many of you have ever had lunch with 244-year-olds? That will be an experience.
It would. Don't be intimidated. It will be great fun.
Next, I'll ask Dr. Changas to come up with some follow-up to the academic performance framework that's been distributed. Paul?
Last month, I shared with you the results of the academic performance framework for 2014, and I promised that I would come back when you'd had more of an opportunity to look over the data. Earlier tonight, Ms. Gentry referenced the other 93% of our students that have not been maybe the topic of conversation lately. Tonight we're going to highlight many of the schools that serve those 93% of our students that are high-performing schools as identified by the framework with respect to 1-year and 3-year data falling in the excelling or achieving categories. I'm also going to point out some of the schools in that group that also serve high percentages of our disadvantaged students, economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, English learners, and so forth. It's going to be a brief presentation, but mostly I wanted to get that information in front of you and be available for questions. You should have a 5-page handout with a description at the beginning of the data that follows. But the first page in that handout identifies schools that have had consistent success with respect to our framework. On the left side of this column are schools that have been in the excelling category over a 3-year period in terms of their 3-year average, and also for the most current year. And I'm not going to read every table to you, but I do want to recognize these schools: Glendale Elementary, Granbury, KIPP Academy, Liberty Collegiate Academy, Lockland Elementary, MLK Magnet, both the K-8 and the 7th and 8th grade in the high school, MNPS Middle College, Nashville Prep School, New Vision Academy, Old Center Elementary, Percy Priest Elementary, Stanford Elementary, and STEM Prep Academy. So they've consistently excelled in our framework. The schools on the right side of the table, which are in the bottom of the first column in your handout, are schools that have been achieving or excelling for both the 1-year and the 3-year results. The Academy at Old Cockrell, Creve Hall, Harpeth Valley, Hume Fogg, Magnet, Lead Academy, Meigs, and Rose Park. These are listed in alphabetical order in each of these tables. The second column on your handout has schools that were in the excelling or achieving category either on the 3-year results, which are on the left, or in the 1-year, but they were not in the previously listed tables. And so those are schools that made it either one or the other, but not both. And I'll also mention one school that did not get on this list, but was 100th of a point on our system away, Julia Green Elementary, from achieving. We have a number of schools that are just below this threshold. There's always going to be a cutoff at some point. The next thing we did was to break the data up by subgroups and look at the schools that serve high percentage of economically disadvantaged students and so forth. As I said at our presentation in October, one of the things we want to do with the framework is identify those schools that are having success in challenging situations and that can serve as models for other schools. And again, we've defined the high-performing schools in this case as our excelling and achieving schools, but there are other schools besides this that are close in terms of hitting that achieving category. All of these schools on this page have at least 80% poverty, as identified last year by Free Reduced Lunch. I'll mention a couple of schools that came close to being on this list in terms of their performance. They're on the rise. A couple of our middle schools, Apollo Middle School and Isaac Litton Middle School, which both schools serve over 80% economically disadvantaged students. There are additional schools that can serve as models. And Apollo is also a school with high English learners that can serve in that role for schools with similar demographics. And then the next table you have are schools with high percent English learners. In this case, they're all 20% or higher. And you can see in several of these tables, we have a high representation of charter schools. We also have Cockrell and Creve Hall on here, as well as last year Cameron Middle School's last grade. Then comes schools with high percentages of students with disabilities, 14% or higher. And again, these are shown in alphabetical order. And then there's in our state accountability system, there's what we call an ethnic subgroup, and it's defined as the students who are Black, Hispanic, or Native American. And this table shows schools that are high performing that have at least 80% of students that fall into that category. And in this case, you can see they are all charter schools. We have some other schools. Again, I mentioned Apollo earlier. They're a school with 75% Black, Hispanic, Native American. But one of the things we'll be looking at next is to dig deeper into that data to find other schools, particularly those that are showing growth, that are also moving in the right direction. And then schools with a high mobility rate, here defined as at least 35%. And the definition for mobility in our district is the number of students that enter or exit a school after the 10th day, after things stabilize a bit, divided by the student enrollment. So it's roughly a percentage of our enrollment that's moving, but remember that we have students who move in and out sometimes multiple times out of the same building. But we know that mobility is a challenge for a number of our schools, and that it does have a negative impact in terms of student achievement. The third page of your handout lists schools that have made the greatest growth in terms of the framework from one year to the next. And on your handout, on my PowerPoint, it's spread over 2 slides, but you have a listing of all of the schools that moved up at least 15 points on our 0 to 100 scale in terms of single-year progress from 2013 to 2014. And the demographics of those schools is also shown. The bolded column toward the middle of this table has the actual percent increase. So you can see Cameron Middle School made a 58-point gain. Cameron College Prep, almost a 47-point gain in 1 year. As we talked quite a bit about last time, and in previous presentations of our framework, the framework is heavily focused on progress or growth, which gives it quite a bit of flexibility in terms of performance from year to year. It's not growth is not as stable as single measures of achievement. But we also feel that that's one of the strengths of the measures in terms of looking at trends. But I'll also point out that trends are not established in 1 year, and we have to look at multiple years, which is why we typically look at 3 years of data in terms of trend. I'll mention a couple of schools near the top of this list that are priority schools. Robert Churchwell and Buena Vista made tremendous gains last year. However, they had lost significant points the previous year. So the key for our priority schools and other schools that are on the cusp of priority is to see those sustained gains over time. But it was encouraging that they did make significant jumps last year. And then the last 2 pages of your handout are just there's some duplication here. It's just a different visual, but it's the data that was used to basically to construct the tables on the second page in terms of those high flyers. And on page 4, you see the schools in order of their 3-year average in terms of performance from highest to lowest in the excelling and achieving categories. And their demographics, and then I have bolded those schools that serve high percentages of economically disadvantaged English learners and so forth. So it's just a different visual if you want to look across multiple demographic subgroups of these schools and what their characteristics are, as well as their mobility rate. And then finally, the last page shows similar information based on a ranking based on the 1 year excelling and achieving. So those are all the schools that in 2013-14 school year were excelling or achieving. But it also shows their 3-year performance and their demographics. So we're continuing to dig through this information and to identify schools that, in terms of trends and the demographics they serve. But at this point, I will open it up for any questions.
No. Ms. Pierce? Come back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tanger. This is great information, and I just have one question and or comment on the mobility rate that is constantly shown for the Academy at Old Cockrell. Would that not be a tad skewed because of the type of program that they do offer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And we have a number of schools that are outside the norm in terms of those situations, and we understand that. But so we're not going to be concerned about dealing with that mobility because that's a given for them.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul, for this presentation. And I'm appalled that that Robert Churchwell made 42.37 points of increase in gains, and yet they're still on the priority list. And I know that because they were lower, but I mean, this really shows that some of our priority schools are already beginning to turn around, and they're on a good trajectory. So, as I look down at Napier at 22.95, what's average? What kind of gains are average?
Last year, the average gain in our district was a 5-point gain across all of our schools, and in previous years, it's been just a few points typically. Again, you've got to look at multiple years in those trends, but you bring up a very good point in terms of the fact that our schools that have certain labels attached to them, whether it's state accountability or our own accountability, are not all in the same place and certainly not going in the same direction. So we had a considerable discussion last time about the fact that we have priority schools based on one-time measures, and all of the priority schools, when we look at their data on the framework, they're all getting less than a third of the potential points, but they're going in very different directions over a 3-year period. Let me clarify, over a 3-year average. But when you look at the growth, there are very significant differences. They're starting in very different places, some of these schools. But I hope we can supplement the state accountability data with this data and other additional data from the observations we make in schools and so forth to make decisions that are based on more than just where we are at a given point, because the trends are very different.
I know that it's a statistical term called regression to the mean. So the lower schools are, the easier it is maybe for them to make progress because of that regression to the mean, whichever way that is. But what do we know about things that are going on at Churchwell and some of the other priority schools that's where we're making these tremendous gains?
Well, certainly Dr. Coverstone and Dr. Steele can better address the what's happening, but I do know that that's one of that's the next area, and there's work that's already going on in leadership and learning and in the I-Zone to look at what's happening below the surface. But I know in talking with Dr. Steele recently, one of the things we would like to do is to look at individual teachers who have made tremendous growth and have conversations with them, and we're in the process of doing a little study to try to get a better handle on that. But that's what's critical now, to define the practices that lead to results and things that we can model. We know that there are certain givens and that in terms of the leadership and quality of teaching, but how teachers get there can vary somewhat. But that's where we're going. The first step is to identify those cases, and then to just have those conversations. So and also to recognize that success.
Yeah, I'd like to make a point and maybe recognize Dr. Coverstone just for a brief moment about the two that are there that are priority schools, Churchwell and Buena Vista, and a lot of the work that we're doing this fall with priority schools is trying to analyze on a much broader basis, not just the state criteria that put schools in priority status, which is achievement data. It's achievement test scores. To look at the trends, the movement that's being made in these schools, whether the trend line is up. We want to consider growth. We want to know that if a school has low achievement scores, that it's moving in the right direction at a significant pace. And we want to analyze why. What are the instructional practices that are happening in those schools? And I want to ask Alan, will you say just a brief word about the two that Ms. Spearing asked about, Robert Churchwell and Buena Vista?
Sure. I think in both of those cases, you have teams that are coming together under new leadership that's been there, in one case just a couple of years, in another case really just beginning this year, but coalescing last year through the change in leadership that happened there. The cultural aspects of those teams coming together is probably first and foremost, and I think you see pretty large gains in Tennessee Tell survey data and measures of the culture components of the school as a component of our academic performance framework. That's a big part of it. Secondly, we have established in both of those cases internal teacher leadership structures that empower teachers that are highly effective to work closely in teams of teachers with more than one adult in the classroom. And those teams of teachers are responsible for supporting the development of newer, younger teachers who are just coming into the system. And in both cases, although not this year at Robert Churchwell, but last year at Robert Churchwell and continuing at Buena Vista, we also have an aspiring teachers program which puts pre-service teachers in those same teams and sort of creates a career progression for teaching where you can improve as a teacher and still stay in the classroom. Those are some of the big takeaways that we've seen in both of those schools.
Great, thank you.
And if I could make one comment, since Dr. Coverstone mentioned the Tell survey and the culture data. In the current system, they have a small weight in terms of the academic performance framework, but we also know that those are levers for growth, that the school culture, and I hope in the future we have quality measures of social emotional learning that could be included here, but we shouldn't lose sight of that data because it can have an impact on other academic measures as well.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Brennan? Ms. Hunter? All right.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I love this layout. This is so easy to read. I appreciate that. And I did have a question on how it's being used. It may be more for Dr. Steele, but on these schools that are high performing, is this where you're drawing a lot for your network lead principals for some of that talent to help share the best practices? Is it coming from the framework primarily?
I know that it is a factor, and I'll let Dr. Steele talk to that.
Yeah, this format that you're looking at tonight was shared with us on Monday, so this is our first week seeing it in this way. But yes, the academic performance matrix is used to determine how our networks, who leads the networks, and also how schools are grouped together from achieving to target schools, or review. There's no target schools in the networks, to review schools. So they are grouped together based on high performers and medium and lower performers. It's also used to for our title supplemental funds, additional resources resources in schools, like Reading Recovery, Literacy Partnership with Lipscomb, Reading Interventionist, Read 180. A lot of literacy-focused resources are used using this academic performance matrix. So that's 2 ways we're using it in leadership and learning for now.
Okay. And do you know on the ELL, how do they qualify? What qualifies a school for receiving Title III? I was at STEM Prep on Friday. I was just surprised to learn that they don't receive any Title III funding for ELL.
Do you know what the cut criteria are?
Okay.
We'll have to get back to you on the what the cutoff is for Title III.
Thanks. Thank you.
I just have 2. One to build on Ms. Pierce's question. So when we look at the excelling bucket on this last page, page 4, as well as the achieving, how many of the school leaders leading these schools are in fact lead principals, though?
I'm sorry, how many are lead principals?
Yeah.
I'll have to get back to you on the numbers. One of the things that we are currently working on is tying all of our performance framework data to principles in terms of patterns over time. And mostly as we make decisions in the future, when you put a principal in a challenging situation, a turnaround situation, you want to give them sufficient time, and having a track record is certainly a key factor in the confidence you have in giving that time. But I will tie that back to those leaders in those schools and get with Dr. Steele in terms of their current status.
On page 4, 3 of them, I have to look at the last page.
Got it. Okay.
They have to apply, so if they don't want it, we invite all of them to apply, but we can't force them to apply.
Can we very strongly
I think everything I can.
Recruit them? I mean, I liked where you were going, Ms. Pierce, which is, it seems logical that if we see, especially given the 3-year status, I mean, that's pretty stunning. I mean, a huge shout out to all these schools, because that's hard to achieve. It's just consistently good performance year after year. And so they've got to lock on something.
Yeah.
So it seems like that's the quickest way to sort of see the actual ideas. But that's actually good to know, Dr. Steele. So we need an all-out recruitment effort then to get them.
It's 4 of them.
4. Got it. Okay. Well, I'm sure all of us would be happy to help recruit if you need us. And then my only other question was something that we had discussed before. I don't know if this is a question for you, Dr. Register, but the use of the entire framework, what is the timeline for solidifying how we actually use the framework to govern, to both articulate expectations, to help articulate our expectations, and then the what next? When people are either in the excelling category, it seems like a logical conclusion would be we should aggressively recruit them to become lead principals or somehow really play a significant role in sharing best practices. Or if they're in the target status, they know what ensues then.
Well, and I don't know who the best person to respond to that is. I will say that the framework's only been in place a little over a year now, but I have seen its use continue to grow. But it is a process.
So Alan and Jay both can respond to this, but I'll start by saying that what we're going through right now, this process of looking at the priority schools. I think it's very instructive for us to identify the best practices, to look at the best practices, and to consider replicating those when we're looking at turnaround strategies. I know the aspiring teacher model at Buena Vista is one that's really caught my attention, and that's essentially using student teachers in a different way to put 2 adults in every classroom. We've heard that requested in schools that haven't done it yet, but we're looking at that as a model to use in some of the turnaround strategies that we're developing. I know one of our charter schools, East End, uses that approach too. So we've got 2 schools that are really breaking the odds there one of our priority zone schools, one of our charter schools, to use that process to our advantage, and we're looking at expanding that. And I think that's the process that we go through now across the board as we analyze our schools and really look to find those best practices and move forward. And also the leadership, looking for leadership is very important here. Jay or Alan, either one of you or both of you, please add anything. Dottie, do you have anything to add to it?
And I'll just add, I've pulled up a slide that we presented last year at the beginning of this process, potential uses, but I will mention that it helps us inform, but there's always context around the data. So it's one piece, but it's a growing piece.
Yeah, on something like the lead principals, you also have to look at how long the leader's been in place there. So there's been some turnover there. I'll just say with regard to the charter school sector, we've, I think, got it pretty well established now that if there's a 3-year average of target status, we're going to move to close that school. We therefore are able to notify schools a year or 2 years in advance if they're headed in that direction. We've done that this time around with schools also that either have a 1-year or a 3-year average in review status as well, just to let them know that they're not trending in the direction of renewal. And we will use, we've established and are using, as we get to renewal decisions, those schools that are consistently performing in the green categories will have an expedited renewal process, whereas those that aren't in that will have a much more difficult and possibly impossible renewal process. So.
Yeah, and I did know that there was a sort of stricter approach with the charter sector in particular. Yeah, I think I'm just more curious about how we're using, I understand it's informing but not determining, but even that's a little ambiguous, because I think basically we're trying to avoid, we don't want to be in a situation where it's end of year and, these priority schools, and we know that there's the bottom 25% that we're now keeping an eye on, so that no matter what happens across the state, we're very on top of what needs to happen, and I feel like this could be helpful.
Absolutely. The trend data you're speaking of does give us a clear picture of where schools are moving. So let me speak to that just a minute. On the trend data, we use that to determine support or intervention plans for principals that we see that our schools are dipping down and they have multiple years in that building. It also informs us, without calling any names or any schools, of principals that are removed from those schools or removed from the principal's job. On the positive side of it, the elementary tier has pulled together these principals that were in the excelling category, and they, as soon as this was published, they did a forum for all elementary principals on strategies that they were implementing to get this achievement. I sat in on that, and and they also brought a teacher from each of their buildings or coach to share the strategies that they had put in place that they were seeing as the most results coming from. A third way that we're just I shouldn't even be talking about in public yet, but we're working with STEM Prep. They reached out to us. They're having such success with their EL students to create some type of joint partnership around EL students. That tier that doesn't quite come in as newcomers, developing some kind of service delivery model for them. So Kevin Stacy and Dottie's team are working with Kristen McGrainer and we'll be bringing a proposal at some point to Dr. Register and hopefully the board in our budget for next year. And so we're using their success with EL to spread that capacity.
Very good.
I'll just say, while there is obviously the accountability component of this, I think the greatest potential is in the sharing of practices. And one of the things that occurred at our Summer Principals Institute was over one component of the framework, which is the TEL survey data, and principals who had made growth on the school culture piece shared out with other principals in terms of the practices there. So that's what I'm hoping we can use this more so in the future for.
All right, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I love the focus on best practices, and I'm sure you all have been working with that for a while, but I think it's the first time we are openly discussing it as a board, so I think that's a great thing. I was just kind of curious about the reaction from administration to Mr. Hobbenwright's suggestion about having a turnaround team come in. I don't know that much about it, but I know there are people that specialize in that. Does anyone have any reaction to that?
I'll defer to Dr. Register on that.
It's the first time I had heard about having an external team come in. I'll refer back a couple of years. We hired an external team to come in and travel. You have a report tonight. They were here for 2 years, did a lot of work, external planning. We learned a lot from them. You can see, you've seen it as a handout. I think we learned as much as we could from them, and have incorporated that into a lot of our practice. There are other consultants that we can use. We've talked about a couple of them, but we haven't made any firm decision at this time to employ one. But we do have that as we do have some of those external consultants in our in the realm of possibility to use in the short term or longer term if we need them.
So would a
There's a
turnaround?
group called Mass Insight that we've talked to several times. I think they're pretty good, and some other groups like that. Jay, I'm drawing a blank right now, but you know there are always consultants ready to work with us, and Mass Insight's the one that we've had a number of conversations with that seems to have some real potential for us to look at alternative approaches to working with priority schools. Any other comments from Jay or Alan, either one?
So would the turnaround team, and I'm asking because I don't really know what it means exactly, but would the turnaround team do more than just study the schools and make suggestions like Tribal did, or would they go in and actually work with it? Just depends on.
So Mass Insight is really an approach to looking at clusters of schools. And we talked to them specifically about the East Nashville strategy, so it wouldn't necessarily be having a consulting group work with each individual school or the bottom 25% or anything like that. I think where we are now is really in the short term looking at consultants that might advise us on directions that the system could take. And certainly that's a possibility. We don't have any concrete recommendations or anything to bring forward at this time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Register. Thank you, Dr. Tengus. Let's move to committee reports. Ms. Spearing, Teaching and Learning.
Yes. Teaching and Learning Committee met prior to the school board meeting on October the 28th. Michelle Wilcox presented information on the principal evaluation instrument. And the evaluation instrument is arranged in a hierarchy of executive lead principals, network lead principals, and principals. All are observed once each semester, but they gather data all during the year. And principal evaluation tool has 4 standards with 17 domains. Best practices for student success was discussed, including achievement test data and how that's used. But Michelle Wilcox included other sources of student success, including social emotional learning, high school graduation, attendance, project-based learning, music, and the arts. Some might argue that this is really where students actually learn how to think, how they learn how to work with others. And it's often difficult to see passion in our kids develop while they're focused on achievement tests. But when students are exposed to project-based learning activities, this is where we see passion develop and love for learning. Dottie Critchley talked about response to interventions, and she helped us to understand that RTI is going to take 2 to 3 years to fully implement with fidelity. We've switched from standard-based interventions to skill-based intervention. The DEA has been replaced with a better instrument, NWEA, which is aligned with Common Core. We also use a universal screener 3 times a year to assess students. Achievement Net is used in reading and in numeracy. Although we use these screeners, the best opportunity for learning comes from the formative assessments which teachers use to inform and drive their instruction. Tony Majors gave us an update on Community Achieves, which is now in 14 schools. Tony Majors suggested that every school does not need a Community Achieves program, but that we probably need to have between 24 and 30 community schools in Nashville. Community schools provide wraparound services not only in academics, but in health and social services, youth and community development, and community engagement. Lisa Wiltshire and Phyllis Phillips updated us on the governor's request for $70 million for pre-K for Memphis and Nashville. If funded, Nashville could add another 400 pre-K seats and maintain those seats for 4 years. We could even add a new pre-K center. In order to meet the requirements of the grant proposal, however, MNPS would need to upgrade and polish their professional development for the teachers and provide more wraparound services for families, including health and mental health screening, social services, parent engagement programs, nutrition services, workforce development. The grants award will be announced for pre-K December of 2014. That's not true. No, the nutrition service workforce. Vandy is conducting a study on pre-K, and it won't be completed, though, until 2019. The governor has not changed his mind about offering pre-K across the state, but he is waiting to hear the results from the Vanderbilt study. Our next meeting for teaching and learning is scheduled from 11:30 to 12:30 on November the 20th. And then we will, we're not sure about whether we're going to have a meeting in December or not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beering. And I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Pierce, for community engagement.
Okay. So our Community Engagement Committee, which we'll be bringing a motion to change the name of this committee to Communications and Public Engagement. We met Monday, November 3rd here. It was a small group, and we just went back over our starting point, which is to meaningfully engage the community in decision-making processes that are intentional and systematic and strengthen collaboration with the school district and stakeholders. So we had discussed at our October meeting that we were going to look at a public opinion survey that our new communications director, Janelle Lacey, brought to us, and we decided that it was a great starting point, but we wanted the questions to go deeper, and so we'll be looking into how we gauge community opinion going forward. She also had prepared for us just an assessment of what we already have as far as tools for communication internally and externally, and as board members, how we can use those to better communicate and reach our constituents. And then there also is a tool that we have developed called a Teachable Moments, and that is simply an area of reflection for both the staff and the board as we can look back at events that have happened and also to help us plan going forward on how to avoid any controversies that might come up. And then we also have been looking at case studies around the country of how other boards across the country engage their community when they make decisions. And our next meeting will be Monday, December 1st at the Martin Center, and we're going to be meeting the first Monday of the month. So that is the report.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. And because our chair gave her report before she left, we just have conference reports. Who wants to be the first lucky one?
Amy.
Dr.
Amy.
All right, it's all you.
All right. First of all, I'll just say that I really enjoyed Milwaukee. It was a beautiful historic city. It has the most fresh water of any other city in the U.S. So the theme of the conference was fresh water, fresh thinking, and urban education. And I was very thankful for the opportunity to attend this national event and learn from other urban districts that are facing similar issues. I attended several great sessions at the conference, but today I'd like to share what I learned at a session that focused on the use of wraparound services to help close the achievement gap and on engaging families and communities to meet the needs of urban students. I think we all know that learning does not take place inside the school bubble, just inside the school bubble. There are a myriad of outside of school factors that impact a student's school performance. In fact, one study found that school-related factors account for only about 21% of academic outcomes, and teachers alone account for only 9% variation in student achievement. So outside of school factors account for the majority of school performance, about 60%. I think it's really important that we look beyond school walls to help struggling students. and give them the supports that they need. So here's what 2 districts are doing to help their students. The first presentation I saw was from Hillsborough County, Florida, which has one of the highest rates of homelessness of the country. 10% of their students on free and reduced lunch qualify as homeless. This presentation was about a program that focuses on children who are considered, quote, unaccompanied youth, which means they're not eligible for foster care, they've slipped through the cracks, and they're on their own. The presenter described these children as invisible kids in survival mode. Excuse me. To help these children, a privately funded organization formed to partner with the school district and offer holistic services to the children. They match each child with a long-term mentor. They provide housing, food, medical and dental care, financial aid to colleges, clothing and other basic needs. They offer anger management and gratitude classes, teach the children what they called, quote, the hidden rules of the next socioeconomic class, help them with applications for college and scholarships, and provide leadership training. The primary focus of the program is on the social, emotional well-being of the child. These interventions have proven very effective. Students who remain in the program have a 100% success rate, and children who participate in the program show a dramatic decrease in school absences. After 2 years in the program, students show a 1.5% grade point average increase, and 98% of their participants have gone on to a 4-year college. The second presentation I saw was by the Parent Teacher Home Visit Project in Sacramento, California. And this program focuses on improving parent-teacher relationships to boost school performance. The Parent-Teacher Home Visit Project was a departure from earlier efforts in that district, which focused only on in-class academics. This program sponsored over 5,000 home teacher visits last year. And it's a voluntary program that uses Title I dollars to pay the teachers who volunteer to participate. The program focuses on relationship building with families to teach parents how to help their children in school. 97% of the parents who participated in the program indicated that they gained a better understanding of what they need to know, and teachers involved in the program felt better able to collaborate with families. Students involved in the program saw improvements in fluency and math and had higher school attendance rates. So I think the takeaway from both of these presentations was that relationships really matter when it comes to learning. Healthy social emotional learning is vitally important to student success, and students with healthy support systems perform better in school. I think all of that's common sense, but I think sometimes we forget that students are much more than numbers on a test. If we can help meet their needs as a district and as a broader community, they will have a much greater chance of success in school and in life. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I attended the Council of Great City Schools in Milwaukee from October the 22nd through the 25th, 2014. And I chose to focus on professional development. So I attended 3 various professional development presentations, and each of them had like a panel of people presenting. One was from Fresno, California, another from Kansas City, and the third one was from Boston. I'm going to focus tonight on what I learned from Fresno, California. They wrote an innovative professional development grant, and it was funded through the Bill Gates Foundation. And they looked at their professional development, and they said that they believed that what they had was a sit and get professional development. It was mediocre. And the question was, how do we engage teachers in meaningful professional development? So the plan was to continuously monitor teachers on the level of professional development that they were receiving in order to build support. They learned that teachers needed time for collaboration with their peers, and that time was hard to find, and it was even more difficult to sustain such opportunities. So the rationale was, if we put teachers together with common tools, they become the drivers and find solutions to the problems in their classrooms. So they collected baseline data by asking teachers, by asking the question, how do teachers access knowledge and solve problems when they've exhausted all of their skills that's in their repertoire? A clear outcome of to the administration was that teachers needed time. They needed time to process, reflect. They needed time to design their curriculum as they implemented standards. In this particular district, they focused on middle school teachers, and there were 300 middle school content teachers, and they framed and wrote an implementation guide to Common Core. Teachers videotaped their lessons and analyzed their teaching. Teachers began to learn how to improve their own teaching by analyzing their self-videos. They analyzed and shared student work, and they collaborated with their peers across not only the school, but across the district. Staff listened because teachers begged for more time, and every obstacle that came up was solved by listening to teachers and working productively with administrators. The goal was to reorganize so that teachers could work together without sacrificing the quality of teaching in the classroom. So their solution was the addition of a plus team to take over instruction, to redeploy kids to teams that offered enrichment activities as they focused on building support for Common Core. Therefore, they gave access to over 3,000 students to participate in electives while offering middle school content teachers 16 full days of professional development, job-embedded professional development. These days were organized and very structured. There was a master schedule. They created a culture of teacher collaboration in order to grow student achievement. And they asked, how are we overcoming our challenges? And one of the key issues was that they said teachers and schools had to own their problems. If they didn't own their problems, there was no way that they could make the adjustments that they needed to. I think sharing the kids' work is a very important component of this. They analyzed student work. They shared videos of themselves teaching with their peers. They talked about what their strengths were in the lesson, where they might have made different decisions and why. And they related research to their thinking on the various issues. Teachers slowly began to transform as they related the theory to practice. They studied, analyzed, and reflected on their lessons, and they listened to the critique of their peers. Some of the lessons learned. Instruction must be relevant, not only for kids, but for teachers. Professional development must be relevant and must impact their teaching. Teachers, if they're going to be involved in professional development, they need to see a clear path to how that impacts instruction. Extended time for learning was essential, but technology was a secondary focus to instruction. Principals were brought in to learn side by side with the teachers. And they kept asking these questions. How do we make learning meaningful for teachers? And what they kept coming back to was this continuous feedback loop. We offered teachers these things, and then we asked them what was good, what was helpful, what was not. And they listened and continued to redevelop and perfect their plan. In MNPS, we already have begun our first year of our Comprehensive Literacy Initiative in collaboration with Lipscomb University under the auspices of Dr. Tammy Lipsey. Teachers and principals are raving about the quality of the professional development. Likewise, our charter schools are doing some innovative, high-quality professional development, and we can learn from them. Most charter schools work a longer day, and some teachers have an 11-month contract. And this provides extra time, extra opportunities for significant professional development. Sometimes it's associated with alternating the schedule that allows for blocks of learning and planning time for teachers during the school year and also during the summer. So this is something we will continue to talk about in teaching and learning, and I know Jay has some things to offer that we look forward to hearing about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berry.
During the conference, we had representation from Nashville. Dr. Keisha Ray and Dr. Register presented the All-Stars training program. And I have also brought materials back for our board members. In addition, Dr. Terry Greer was chosen as the Superintendent of the Year. This is a wonderful conference. It is well attended from the 66-member urban systems all over the nation, and it's well worth our attendance. And so, as many of us that can attend, we hope you'll be able to experience this particular conference at some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Ms. Frog.
There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.